Good afternoon and welcome to the Takeup. Today we have episode 54, Making Money with Embroidery, Segments, Styles, and Customer Profiles. Greetings, everybody. As you can see, I already have my links list pulled up and made sure that we have some links to talk about this week. But today we have an interesting topic, at least for me. We are talking about sales. We are talking about segments. We are talking about customers because this is something a lot of us want to make a little money at. Now, I know not everybody who follows me is into making money. Sometimes we are here for the art and the digitizing. And believe me, there will be other shows where we are deeper on the art and digitizing. I've heard you guys talking. Trust me, there are some topics coming up that you're going to like. Today is going to be a little bit more about marketing, a little bit more about business, but it should be for all different kinds of segments and all different kinds of situations. What will be interesting for you in this is that we do have different methods and different modes of making money, different modes that we're going to work through, and certainly different kinds of customers, different market segments that we can discuss. So a little bit of market segments, a little bit of e-commerce, a little bit of different kinds of shops that you can run and why and how, and a little bit about customers. So this is an overview. I'll go ahead and make this short. Why am I doing this today? Before I say hi to everybody, I'm going to just explain why am I doing this. I've had a couple of people who are struggling to make money with their business or who are afraid to try and make money with their business who looked at me and just said flat out, like, how does anybody make any money at this? I've made my entire career up to the point that I was no longer, actively embroidering. Made my entire career being part of the service of embroidering garments. And actually a fairly small segment in comparison to all the different stuff I'm going to discuss. So it's absolutely possible. It is something that everybody can do if you want to do, but it does take a little bit of thought. And there is certainly more flooding in certain parts of the market than others. There are certainly more people going for certain segments than others. And you can do both too broad or too narrow a niche. These things can happen for you. You can have issues with that. But the people who I've known who go and find their audience, the people who I've known who continue to try and put themselves out there, who show the work they want to do, who look for that work, tend to get that work. So what I wanted to do today is really kind of broad scope. Say we're going to touch a little bit of everything. Will we do some deeper dives? Absolutely. I know you guys like when we do deep dives. There will be times where we go a little deeper on stuff. I know that there are topics here like your ideal customer for e-commerce that I could do an hour on for sure. But we're going to go overall as a kind of a brainstorming process to get you thinking about little different ways that you might market yourself, little different things that you might want to get into, different markets you might want to address, different kinds of embroidery you might be able to do or want to do that you haven't been doing yet. So we're going to touch all over the place. It's going to be different. Some of it will be for you, some of it won't. But hopefully with this in mind, a little bit of brainstorming, discussing stuff with people who are in the comments and chat, we will get to something that sparks you toward thinking about different markets, about thinking about your audience differently, and kind of get you thinking about how you can both make money, certainly, and what kind of markets are out there and what you might do differently or try. Because a lot of this, it's like something that we talked about earlier, an earlier show called The Half that I do with Aaron Montgomery from the Two Regular Guys podcast. You might have also caught this morning. They were talking all about niche markets. So go back to Two Regular Guys, find them and check their thing out, talking about niche markets this morning. Something that we talked about was that sometimes you got to get out there and fail quickly and learn quickly. And there's nothing wrong with trying something out and having it not work out and going on to something new. Continuing to put yourself out there is a thing. And before we get into any more than this, I'm going to say this. One of the biggest things people do when things are going rough that kneecaps their business immediately is they stop marketing. If you stop marketing and you stop showing your work when things are going rough, if you stop selling, you stop offering yourself, you stop putting yourself in front of people and making it clear what you are capable of, there's no way for you to keep getting business. It's very easy when we have some business, even when things aren't going well, to retract into ourselves and to work entirely inside the business, to work toward production, especially if you're someone who comes from production, comes from embroidery, comes from the actual doing of the thing. It's easy to retract into that and to end up not doing the marketing, not doing the business, not working on the development stuff that is going to carry you on. It's very easy to retract into it, especially if you're a production person, an art person, a creative person first. You may retract into that and start working on individual jobs, thinking that making the needle go up and down is the only thing that matters for embroidery. And it seems like it is. If it doesn't happen, certainly nothing else happens. But if you stop marketing, if you stop selling, if you stop trying to put yourself out there, your jobs eventually go down. You just over time, the likelihood is certain customers will fall away or will not need your service. And if you're not moving towards new customers, you will absolutely find that growth stalls at some point. So let's say hi to some folks, because I always love to say hi to you guys when you first show up. And number one thing also, hey guys, the link is already up. If you haven't checked it out, the link is up for the links. I've got several things that are kind of related, some unrelated. I like to give you guys bonus material to look at later on in the week, and some of it's a little older, some of it's a little newer. Most of it's still pretty useful because I've been talking about e-commerce marketing market segments for a very, very long time. So some of it's been out there for a while. You're going to find that we've got some cool stuff that you may want to see. I'll go ahead and show you real quickly on a links list. We will go over some more of it, but you'll find a discussion I do about niche marketing. There's actually an entire episode of the show about niche marketing and working toward niches and how that helps people who are not great at sales, who don't feel like they're great at sales. There's a guide to starting embroidery business, just has some basic stuff about embroidery that's functional. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit, just as the price of entry is that you know how to do your job. Obviously, you know how to make embroidery happen. Patches, gradients, and e-commerce. This is actually an interview, a podcast interview that gets into e-commerce, and it really encapsulates it. It was a really fun thing I did with Graphics Pro magazine where they had me kind of talk about different things. And inside that is a nice little chunk on e-commerce. It's easy to kind of handle. It's nicely produced. So I thought I'd put it up there. There's a little piece in here about the pet market, which is something I don't really talk about here, but it's a market segment that is different. And I thought looking at a discussion of market segment there might be interesting. Little piece on the healthcare market I did several years ago, which is actually more critical now than ever. A little bit about cross-selling. And the last one is another podcast that I was on talking about e-commerce. So I like to share some of the other stuff that I've done before in case you guys want to look at it. And it will be there in the links. But before we get on, let's go ahead and say hi to a few people who are in the comments already. B Thrash saying, say hey from Somerton, South Carolina, and hope everybody is well. Yes, and by the way, I wish everybody well. I had a little injury this week. If I haven't been as present as usual, injured my knee and was laid up quite a bit. So I apologize if I've missed some messages from you folks. If somebody has sent me a message I haven't answered, that would be why. I've been kind of convalescing a little bit this week, or at least I've been having a harder time focusing. Cindy King out in Texas says, afternoon, I hope you are doing well out there. I know to all my people who are out in Texas, I hope that you have got power. If you're here listening, don't waste your battery on this if you need it. But hopefully you've got power and you're warm and you're doing all right. I'm pulling for you guys out in Texas. I mean, Texas and New Mexico have some history. we may look at each other askance across the border, but I really hope you guys are all doing well. Frank out in the UK. Frank, good evening. Good evening to everybody out that way. Darren from Bulgaria, awesome. Thank you for being here. Josta from Sweden. I love that we've got an international crowd here. What I'm going to tell you is super awesome stuff. I've been working on some fonts and things and adding international characters to old embroidery fonts that didn't have them. So love to see you guys here. And after my own hearts to have you guys here. Yes, I don't speak as many languages as I should, being out from America, as we often say. We're like a bunch of little countries all stitched together all in the States. But we do still love to have you guys using software and embroidering, and I love to make stuff for you. So we have Justin, who says the obvious question here: we're supposed to make money doing this? It is a labor of love sometimes. But Justin out there digitizing and talking to M Nerd. We're going to talk more about the people from the Embroidery Nerd group. Sometimes we do this stuff for the passion. We forget to make money, but we have to realize that our time is valuable and we need to make money if we want to continue sometimes. And that's the thing, is even for people who come from the craft side and they feel weird about asking for money for things, I'm like, these are the precious hours of your life you are spending in making something. This is your creative input and your learning. It is worth something. If nothing else, get paid to fund your ability to keep doing what you love. I'd like to see you make profit and do more than that. I like business. I'm a commercial guy. Marta Caffrey saying, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. Ramona, I'll be listening while making money. Yes, get out there and stack that paper. I love to hear it. Mike, good afternoon, Mike. Thank you for being here. Reciprocator number one. Jeff says, I made it. Happy to have you in. And Jeff says, looking forward to it. Absolutely. Matt Enderley says, hi, diddly ho. Probably just to make me say it. But okay. Hi, diddly ho to you, ma'am. We have lots of folks in today, so I'm not going to probably get to everybody. I'll try and run through a few. Josh, good afternoon. Heather, good evening. Happy to have you here. Don, hey gang, turning in from snowy Pennsylvania. Take care. Found everyone. Hi all. Jocelyn, hello from South Georgia. Happy to have you there. Cool Kids Club. Absolutely. We are the coolest kids. Reciprocators, people who give back, are the coolest. Ramona says, embroidery is my fourth business and the only one that grew. Man, business is hard. And certainly there are things that you think will take off and won't. There is nothing to say that you're going to certainly hit every time. I will say this, though, like Ramon is showing you, keep getting back up. That's how you learn, and that's how you get to the one that's successful, is keep getting back up. Aaron, hello, Aaron. Happy to see you again today. Lots of people have been following me through the podcast today. And Marianne says, good afternoon from Santa Fe. If you stop marketing, others will get your jobs. Certainly. And if you stop marketing, people forget that you're there. It's easy to keep taking orders from the customers you already have and thinking that you're doing the right thing. But ultimately, growth is the only way to keep going, because trust me, I have ridden out businesses that failed, relying on 2 or 3 core customers and not playing to what you're going to develop next or how you're going to handle it. We all know the phrase, putting your eggs in one basket. Trust me, it goes poorly when that basket's bottom drops out. You do need to be there. I was watching a stream with like one other person, had to find the peeps. Yeah, there are other streams that are covering me. So you'll find like on the Facebook stream, some of them are from I have my published page and I have my personal page, and they're on like 3 streams. So yeah, the people are all in one good one there. Anyway, let's see. Cindy says, so sorry to hear that. I hope you get better quickly. We just got power back at our shop, but no water. It's been a rough week, man. Out in Texas, seriously, prayers for Texas people. Whatever you do, think nicely about poor Texas right now. They've had some rough stuff for sure. Love this comment from Fanny before we keep going out. Never be afraid to sell. Working on design right now for a customer who's still learning her machine, and I am learning more about digitizing that way. We grow together and both make some money. Just let the customer know up front what to expect and stay honest. That last part of that sentence, I know I've talked about it before, but one of the chief things you're going to do with any customer, with any relationship, whether we're talking about the ownership of digitizing files, which is where this came up with me earlier, or you're talking about how things are going to go with delivery, with a job, how skilled you are at a thing they ask you to do, especially if you take on some off-the-wall requests, which I certainly have in my career. The thing that's going to make this all work, that makes it a cooperative thing that you're doing with your customer, is communication. Communication. If you guys show up and deal with potential problems ahead of time and be honest with people ahead of time, you have the best chance of things going well. And honestly, know your value. Absolutely. Certainly. Don't pretend to things you don't know. Be honest when you don't know something. Work toward things you don't know, though. I have taken jobs that I don't know how I'm going to get them done. I talk to the customer and say, all right, I have some ideas. These are the ideas I have. Can you afford experimentation or no? Can you afford the time it takes me to work on this or no? Can you afford if we need to do an extra sampling run or something else or no? And also decide how much exposure is in it for you. If you're going to do the experimentation for free, think to yourself, hey, is this worth it to me right now? Is this something I need to be doing? Does it feed the overall shop? Is it something that's going to help me down the road? Maybe does it provide me additional exposure, additional skills? There are other things besides immediate money that make sense for the shop. Absolutely. As much as I have always said, get paid for your work, what I don't want you to understand from that is that you never touch anything without getting paid. There is work that you do that is developmental for yourself and your shop that can benefit you and someone else, and that's fine. But you have to understand the calculus that's in it, and you definitely have to understand that you're spending the time of your life doing this stuff, and that if someone could do it themselves, they should just do it themselves. They don't need you, then that's what they can do. They can do that themselves. They need you to do it. That means it's valuable. That means it's perfectly fine to get an exchange for it. So yeah, don't be afraid to sell. My first wow, glad to have you here. I'm just starting my little embroidery business and I'm learning how to engage possible customers. You know what? That's a lot of folks. And there's nothing wrong with just starting out and not being entirely sure of what you're doing yet. The thing to remember before anything, like I said, honest communication with people, certainly making sure that you well understand what things take on your end, what your costs are, what your overhead is, what things take for you to do, how much time it takes you to get things done, and to understand that the value of your work, and yes, I know I'm off topic, the value of your work is more than the material and time you put in. And the price that you charge doesn't have to be pegged entirely to stitch count, material costs, or anything like that. Your value is more than that. Your creative calculus is more than that. That is how it's going to have to be. So, you have to know some of these things. Certainly, it doesn't have to get detailed, but I would say know what you're spending, both in time and effort and in funds to be in somewhere, and to then know what you're going to do with that. Anyway, let's get on past that. We'll go a couple more first. I want to start a business, don't know how, which makes me afraid to start. You know what? Get with people who are helping people start businesses. There are tons of groups who are into that. I'm not going to be able to go over stuff like, small business loans, any of that stuff here today. Today, I'm just going to talk about customer stuff like that. What I will say is there are different segments for everybody. And you also, the amount you make and the amount you need to make depends on what you need out of something to survive and what your aims are. And there are people who are saying, if you don't make this much, it's bad, or you don't do this, it's bad. I'm going to say that everybody has a goal they're after, and it makes sense to you what things are worth to you, what your time is worth to you. I'll go ahead and do a couple more comments because there's some funny stuff in here. First, happy to hear that. Cindy says the sun is shining here too in New Mexico. Hasn't been for a while, but yeah, glad to hear that. Matt says, I can't use Photoshop to digitize. No. That's it. No, you can't Photoshop digitize. Anyway, Jeff says, nobody said there'd be math, calculus, I'm dead. No, here's the thing. There's not going to be math, but you do need to do the calculation of understanding how long things take. Otherwise, you can't know what effort you're putting in. I think that's true. Time studies, I think, are more important than people think they are. When people talk about how much they charge for things and they go to an arbitrary like dollar per thousand stitches number, they don't really know how much they're putting into it. They don't know how much overhead they have in it. And then that dollar per thousand is a shot in the dark. It's something that's been said forever, but it doesn't necessarily make sense for all shops, for all locations, for all reasons. Plus, I'm going to be the first to tell you, absolutely. I have charged more for things that I did less work on over the course of my career. There are places where if you sell into high fashion, especially high fashion clothing shops, you would be surprised what things cost and what actual money goes into making them. There is something about the curation of the collection of garments they sell, the creativity they put into it, the design, and honestly, the names that are attached. And it changes value. We all know this is the truth. If you need a watch to tell time, you can get any watch that's accurate. If you want one to shine people on, you might get a Rolex. Yes, they are different. Yes, there's different materials involved, but if you think it's just the materials involved that make it worth what it's worth, not entirely true. But you definitely need to know your costs. I think it's a base thing. And also, when we're talking about customers here, know what kind of customers, what segments are going to feed you. Absolutely. And Jeff says this for sure. Know your costs. I talk about that all the time. I get asked how much should I charge on a daily basis. And you should check out the embroidery nerd groups. If you haven't been on there, we're going to talk about them again today. Great group. I've been part of lots of groups, but they have a really great group that is very good-hearted, good-spirited, who talks about this stuff. But yeah, people don't know how to deal with that stuff. People don't know how to handle costs. But the problem is whenever they ask costs, they do it by committee, which is by either looking at the 5 shops nearest them or asking a bunch of Facebook people to tell them how much they charge and then picking something in the middle that sounds good and going for it. Yes, it can work. Does that actually tell you what your value is? Not really. And this is the huge thing. And Jeff is right. And you'll find episodes of me talking about this. Difference between perceived value and actual value is huge. Also, you can sell things based on actual value. You can increase actual value by making something have more utility or more materials in it. But you can also increase perceived value. And part of the perception of value isn't based on monetary gain. It can be based on creativity and based on your input. It can be based on the relationship they have with you and the fact that they trust you more. It can be based on the fact that you come up with solutions, not just stitches. So think about that for a minute. And yeah, and Mike says this, and I'm absolutely on this one because I talk about emblems and applique a lot. Applique is less expensive time and money and sells for way more. Yes. 100%, because multimedia has a perception of value. Also, embroidery has a high perception of value. It's a luxury item, folks. If you ever tried to sell a print, even a specialty print on, say, like a high-end polo shirt to a golf club, there is a certain perception of an embroidered piece being worth more, that you could be giving somebody embroidery that was less intense for you than the kind of printing or something else that you have done. You could have a custom piece that was sublimated that they don't like, but they like the embroidery despite the fact that the embroidery is cheaper for you to get done in the end. There's perceptions of value that matter, but that's not what we're here for. Let me get to the actual topics. I mean, I love this back and forth. Keep the back and forth going on here, guys, because there's awesome stuff talking about here. And here, Mike, maybe, I don't know if I totally agree, but here, he says, how much should I charge? As much as you can get away with. And here's the thing. I'm going to change that statement. It sounds funny this way, right? As much as you can get away with sounds funny. Here's the thing. What people are willing to pay is the value of the thing. That's the ultimate test. What people are willing to pay is the value of the thing. if you have a convincing argument for the value of the thing, and you make that argument convincing enough that somebody pays for it, suddenly that's what it's worth. Perception of value means a lot. But let's talk a little bit about what we got here to talk about. First, once again, if you guys want to look at those links, they're in the links list. Check that out if you want to see the articles. Some of these are related, some of these aren't. One of the things we're certainly going to talk about are like market segments. We are going to talk about that. And certainly niche markets. The thing is, funny enough, we start saying niche markets, and when it's not always a niche that we're talking about, niche means that it's narrowly focused and that they tend to be smaller. So when we talk about niche markets, these are very tightly defined market segments that are smaller, that tend not to have a broader appeal, but often do have some benefits. The thing is, when we talk about like market segments, those are the larger, big segments that are going on. We're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk a little bit about shop styles. What kind of shops people run, what kind of methods and modes they work in, and just to kind of let you know what's out there and what's possible. But all of these things are going to kind of come together. I'm going to discuss a little bit also about the places that I came from and how I worked so that you can know what my experience is. And here's one of the other kind of differences that comes up really quickly. When we're talking about how we are selling and who we're selling to, for me, the first thing I think about is, are we B2B or B2C? Meaning we are a business. Are we going to another business? Are we serving other professionals? Are we serving people in those markets? This often also means that we're looking for something that is more like a wholesale experience. They're looking for this as a service. They may even look to you as an embroiderer for doing a service, decorating things that exist. Instead of you providing the entire solution, providing the entire garment, whatever, that could be part of it as well. That's contract work, another way you can work. Or B2C, are we going direct to customer? If we're going direct to customer, that's a very different thing. There's a more retail experience that we can be doing here. And it usually does mean, however, that we have to work on things like our branding. We may have to have our own art assets. We maybe make our own lines of pre-decorated or at least pre-designed gear. We might have to have our own templates or do another kind of work there. So first thing to think about with your kind of business is, who am I serving primarily? Am I going business to business? Will I have to work out how to do this more in a bulk method as a service, or am I going direct to customer? Is this something where I can get more retail prices, but it means individual hand holding, making sure I'm shipping or handling individual packages and orders? It's not bulk anymore. It's not as uniform. So first thing to think about when we're talking about business is that these are two different styles of business we can do. Can we do both? Absolutely. The companies I worked for did both, and for different reasons. And I'll talk about that as we go on. But a lot of people think about decoration and think about it as B2B, especially when you're talking about old school decorators. They're thinking about getting large orders from companies that they're going to do bulk decoration on. Big B2B stuff. That is actually, I won't say it's less of the market now, but I would say that in the States, the market, we have a lot more B2C kind of coming up, and especially like individual decorating, even in business to business transactions, we're seeing more small runs, we're seeing more individual decorating, we're seeing more personalization. And that acts more like B2C. And the funny thing is, a lot of my direct to customer work was actually done with company stores. And that was direct to someone who belonged to another business, and we're using business to business like assets, but we were delivering direct to a customer. B2C is another part of that. So think about that direct to customer experience is there. It means more labor on your part generally, but it also means higher margins. Going direct to customer usually means higher margins on the individual garments, but it does mean we have to have the ability to handle that throughput, to do fulfillment, to package things, to ship things, to deal with that section of it that is a little more difficult. And it means probably more interaction with customers per garment, per unit. So something to imagine when we start out here, no matter what market segments we're in, that we might be dealing with business to business, or we might be dealing with direct to customer stuff. So first thing to think about is that. What are we looking for? Is that what we're looking to do? Can you do all of it? Yes. Will you do all of it? Perhaps. But you probably should have a focus that is your primary skill set. I did a lot of business to business work, but certainly did a lot of direct to customer stuff as well. Like I said, it fit into different market segments, and it was still primarily, for me at least, most of it was not direct store stuff like gift shops we'll talk about later, like monogramming, personalization, decoration. That was not the kind of stuff I did. Mostly what I did was selling into businesses, but then also selling directly to customers or employees of businesses, of larger business chains. Also did art stuff, also did pre-print. We're going to talk about that as well, like pre-designed work, did production lines like that, different lines of, resort wear, stuff like that. Did other stuff, but most of my primary focus was in that business to business segment. And that kind of comes to that second kind of half of this. What other kinds of work can we do? There's pre-produced work and custom work. Most of us are thinking about custom design work. Someone's going to come to us and say, I'm looking to get this kind of design. I'm looking to maybe add this kind of personalization to it. That's full custom work or custom design work, at least custom digitizing, maybe custom embroidery work. We're expecting them to come with art assets in mind. That's a traditional decorator that most people are thinking about. They're saying, I'm going to be an embroidery shop. That's going to be people coming to you with the idea of what they want on garments. The other option is pre-produced lines. Now, it can be either that you are acting as the decorator in fulfillment for people who have their own art assets, their own brands. That can be where you're a fulfillment kind of person. You're going to handle somebody who maybe they need an e-commerce solution, they need an embroiderer, they need somebody to do fulfillment and ship out packages, but they have the line, they have the art, they have the audience, they're going to do the marketing. That can be a kind of pre-produced line. The other kind of pre-produced line is something that I actually showed earlier, and I will discuss certainly when I talk about niche marketing, and I'll pull up my screen real quick. When you have your own line of garments or a line of designs, line of art that you are selling, you've created it, you're selling it, you're going to manage the market, the niche. That's then another pre-produced kind of line that you're going to run maybe concurrently with doing custom work, but it's something where I have the branding, I'm preparing that stuff, I'm making my market, I'm marketing into an audience that wants this particular gear. This is my folk music line that I did some time ago, that if you have been with me for a while and you went and checked out that niche marketing video, you'll see that. Also in the links is this article, but there is an entire video where I discuss this in detail. Suffice it to say, pre-produced line is something like that. It's a clothing line, it's a brand line, something where you're doing the branding, you're coming up with the assets, but you can also have the pre-produced lines where someone else has already come up with assets and is looking for you to fulfill it. So that's something else we can talk about too. I essentially just want to lay that out as options. These are all options for decorators because decoration happens either in-house or out of house in all sorts of ways. Another way to handle this too, guys, it can be things getting outsourced. You can do some work yourself, outsource other work, and act as a broker, where you are handling with your knowledge of decorations people want, or getting things in that you are reselling, or just handling the process of getting things decorated. All of these are super options. So these are certainly things you want to think about. I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple comments too. Greg says, along the lines of a customer subject, I had a recent experience with a customer who wanted to create a custom design iron-on patch with no shipping worldwide, and this original customer is an ongoing business relationship. Yeah, absolutely. That's that fulfillment kind of process. You can absolutely get into a relationship where they're handling marketing and you are doing the fulfillment. Absolutely. So it's something to work with. Absolutely. I would say that partnerships are very helpful and useful. If you know what you're good at and your best work is done in production of embroidery, then maybe thinking about getting partnerships with people who want to produce. If you can learn to produce and ship and fulfill, you can then have them do all the marketing, have them do all the head and the lead end work, and you can just do what you do best. These are totally valid things to do. Just make sure you're vetting people carefully. Impression Brand says it's good to have both services. I would say this. I'm going to discuss one-stop shops here briefly too. We'll see how much we get to today. This is probably going to be a part 1 of 2, seeing how much material I have. Most of the places I've been have done both B2B and B2C, have done both custom lines and custom work and pre-produced lines. One of the ones we often did is we would do resort wear for local gift shops, things like that, where we had a line that people could order from and we would produce it on demand when they demanded it. However, it was stuff that we came up with all the artwork for, and we did slight customization for individual gift shops. That is something that we did, and it's also worked as a sideline. If you're someone who's doing custom decoration, there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, I've got all the equipment here. If I have downtime, or if I want to pursue this, I pursue my own line of gear, my own line of apparel, whatever it is, and make this line up. The thing is, you can also use that as marketing tools for your custom work. People will see you and want to know what this stuff is from and find you as a custom decorator through that. And you can also almost use it as proof of your abilities. So this can also be sampling work. There are reasons to do that for sure. You can absolutely do a custom decorated line that's of your own designs and be doing custom work. You can do your own preprint line and do custom work together. There's nothing wrong with that. And certainly a lot of people do, especially, like I said, custom decorators with a little bit of downtime often will think, well, I have a line of interesting t-shirt ideas, or I have a line of interesting hats that I'd like to make. And I encourage people to go ahead and try that stuff. The thing is, you never know which one of these things are going to take off. Plus, you can debut techniques, you can try new things, and then show the work you want to do. So let's say you like making cool hats, make some cool hats, show it to all your social media, throw it in your marketing campaigns, and people will come to you for cool hats because they know you can do what they've seen. They see what they want. If you get it to enough people, there's somebody in that group of people who wants the kind of thing you want to do, and they're going to come to you for it if they like that execution. So it's worthwhile to do some self-directed projects and to think about maybe doing custom lines. And the other thing I'm going to say truthfully is you'll find somebody else who wants to do something custom that is like your pre-produced design line. That is pretty frequently a way that people get work. And I think it's worth looking at. Not everybody's going to make it on their design. And I will say, especially from the point of view of a decorator who's had a lot of people come to him with this attitude, everybody thinks they have the best idea for a witty t-shirt that's going to take off and absolutely burn across social media. Not everybody does. And you don't always know when that's the case. It's surprising to see when something really takes off. Sometimes it is kind of out of your control and you don't know, but if you never do make the thing, if you never show the work, there's no chance to find out. That's when we were talking about kind of getting out there and failing quickly. That's one of the things. Get your ideas out there. Perfect is the enemy of good. Get things out and try them and find out how they work, and then iterate, make new versions as you go, keep trying. Especially when you find you're like, look at how much the outlay is. You can't just throw a ton of marketing money and everything at every idea you ever had, but there's definitely chances for you to make new things, try new things, and keep rolling. So I would say think about that for sure. A couple other kinds of business choices, or at least business segments to look at are thus. One of them that I see a lot is the difference between decoration, full decoration, and personalization. And that's just kind of saying there is an entire embroidery market for name drops and monogramming. Name drops and monogramming is really its own thing. Now, I would say also down south in the US is very different than other segments of the US, and it might be different in your country, but putting names on things literally can be its own business. And I would say there's other kind of shop styles to discuss with this, and decoration is different. We can do also full custom decoration. And instead of just full custom decoration, there'll also be curated decoration, which is using existing stock designs, something that is already designed and made, and they're ready for people to pick out. And that's more like gift shops. And I'll actually talk about this a little bit later, like curated collections for fashion. There's other things you can do with that. But these are another couple of ways we can look at it. A lot of people think we have an embroidery shop. What you're going to do is the classic way I did it was people would come to me with business logos with assets in hand, and we're going to produce exactly what they want. But one of the other completely valid ways to handle things is someone who comes in, and the importance isn't the graphic they're putting on something. The importance is the item. It's an item to be given. It is a gift. It is something that's related maybe to an event. So mobile and event embroidery, which certainly has taken a hit during the pandemic, but mobile and event embroidery can be like this too, where you have a curated set of designs that you're going to decorate for someone on demand, but they're not coming in with their own assets. It is a pre-decorated template or something like that you're going to do. But there's also totally room for personalization. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen either people who are just doing name drops, especially when we're talking about event embroidery, because names are very fast, monograms are very fast to run, or doing monogramming. And that can be in multiple segments. That can be in high-end fashion. That can be in bridal wear. Bridal stuff absolutely has tons of monogramming going on with it. So there are different segments of people, audiences for this stuff that could develop with a small personalization option. And there's also things like the difference between being a personalization shop and doing things like on-site decoration. A great place called Hawthorne and Haney in the UK. I've seen them do a bunch of cooperation with clothing stores where they drop a couple of single head machines in, and they will either do personalization where they have a set of fonts pre-selected, a set of locations and prices, and they will drop names on purchases directly from that store, fashion purchases. The other thing you can do, I've seen this done. I know Tajima partnered up and with I believe this is something for Levi's for a while, and then Your Life is another one out in the UK, I believe. There's people who are doing decorations. A lot of it can be digital printing, but embroidery's out there too, where they have a brand. I think the one was Levi's I've seen previously, where they said, all right, here are your jackets. Here are a selection of designs you can get on your jacket, And they were specifically gated to the event where during this event, we're going to let people use these designs with our garments that we previously designed. Once the event is over, we're not letting anybody else use them after that. So there was scarcity involved for the marketing. People knew that this was almost like a collector's item. And these official designs were used with those garments. And that decoration was done either on site or they were watching it being done on site. But certain decorations are long period designs that are going to take too long for someone to sit and wait for. They were being used as a sales funnel. People were seeing this done on site, putting in their orders, and then having their order shipped after the fact. So it was a hybrid of an on-site design model where they were digitizing, or not digitizing, they were throwing personalization with it. There were names put together with a curated select set of designs that went with a particular line of garments. And they were seeing it done, so there was some sort of kind of draw in the fact that they were seeing the embroidery done. And it was interesting, it was scarce, it was special, it was locked to the brand. And that made people then want to buy, and they were buying for later times, doing normal orders that were just like any other embroidery order as part of that, as well as doing the live decoration. So that's another kind of style we can look at, is we can do curated sets of designs that are set to a brand, which means that they're doing some marketing for you as well. So very different ways to handle this in this thing. Not everything is going to be someone brings a logo, we put a logo on a thing. That's what I'm trying to get through to you guys. It's not that this is something groundbreaking. It's that we may not have thought about things like, hey, why don't I partner with an existing well-known brand or a local brand that people really love? Partner with them, say, okay, let's put together a curated couple of designs that we're going to do. We're going to have a period of time for ordering that you're going to promote. I give you a certain percentage on it. You give me that business. I put that together, and we have a decoration event, even if it's not in person, that lets you get some of that scarcity that drives people. They get an urgency or immediacy. They know there's an end to it. They get the idea of collection, that collector mentality, because they know they might not get it otherwise, and they have an affinity to the other brand that's not you. So you get some marketing juice out of that, and we do that kind of decoration. It's a different mode of thinking from what we usually would do. So like I said, this is not something for everybody, but it's something to think about. What are the things that are interesting about that? We can think about, like I said, immediacy, scarcity, affinity with another brand, and partnership, affiliate nature, that kind of feeding back into that brand so it's helpful for them. So we get symbiosis there, we get that teamwork, and we get to build that team. Then we can also think about decorating outside of the bounds of our normal shop. So interesting things to think about as far as segments there. Let me grab a couple comments and see what's going on here, but let's go ahead and check this out. Jess says, and this is about, I think, the virality of stuff. I can't tell you how many things I thought something would take off only to see it flop, and stuff I thought would fail would take off. 100%. My favorite work that I've done is not the stuff that everybody else likes. Some of the stuff that I did that I thought was a castaway and also didn't take me extra effort are the things that people love the most. I have a specific piece that I might show you guys at some point. It's a trapunto design of the flag, this rough design that's super low stitched. I did it specifically because it was low stitch count on a sweatshirt. The entire drive of me designing this thing was because of its low stitch count. But everybody loved it. I didn't sell it for years, and everyone begged for me to teach it. And it was one of the easier things I had done, and I thought teaching it was really easy too. And here's the other thing I would also like to say. This is about social media, and Jeff is right on the money with this. I am also surprised at how many people find me through hashtags on products I make. Make a sport-specific hat, post with the hashtag. It gets me in front of tons of faces. Absolutely. One of the things I've found when I have a bunch of designs, if you look at theonlystitch.com is my tiny, tiny design site. I haven't updated it in a while, and I've got a bunch of designs ready to go on there I need to work on. However, the set of designs that I have on there, it plays to niche markets. Like I said, niche marketing is going for a narrow niche, often that's underserved. Lots of the designs on there are Viking Age art, Viking Age Anglo-Saxon, early Germanic, early medieval art that I did. You guys, if you know me, you may know that I was once kind of a medievalist in training. So I love this stuff. I love that early Scandinavian and Viking Age art. And I made some of those pieces for my designs. And when I share those with the hashtag Viking or Viking Age art, I get out to a market of people who like Viking stuff, who are not just embroiderers. And when they see it, they want to buy it. I can't tell you how much money I've lost because I'm teaching somebody something and digitizing, but what people want to do is buy patches of my design I already made. So yes, absolutely. Hashtagging in your social media will get you there. Designing for something you love. Also, niche marketing. If you read that other article or go check out my other videos, one of the best ways is to start with a niche that you know. If you're a folk musician like I was back in the day playing my dulcimer, you guys may have actually heard me play dulcimer on this show, then working toward that small niche meant I knew the niche and I knew what kind of things that the people who were in that niche wanted, and it made it very easy for me to market to them. And I had not only intimate knowledge of the audience, I was an insider. Gave me some credit, gave me some ways to get at that. And I'll say this too, absolutely true here. Weddings, bridal, another great one. Thank you, Jeff. Go out and contact wedding planners. Customized napkins for receptions can be good money. People spend a lot on weddings. Absolutely. 100%. And actually, I've got a picture that was on one of my things from Regina, who's often here. Regina may not be here today, but she's a listener who's often here, one of the reciprocators, and somebody who I got to spend days in her shop as a consultant. And she made incredible, awesome veils. And it's amazing. Also, things like she did these bride bags that would say, I do on them. The amount of embroidery was actually very small. But she put all kinds of cool stuff in these bags and prepped them and made them for the people. Also, I'm going to say I made a ton of oversized dressing shirts. So oversized kind of classically men's shirts that the bridal party would put on to cover themselves in their clothing while they were getting made up. And frequently they would have 3 to 4 locations on them. We would provide the shirt ourselves with normal kind of off-the-shelf shirts that we would buy from our suppliers. Monogram on one side, date on another side, bride to be, best made, something on the back. And these things were incredibly expensive. And we sold them hand over fist, tons of money, made whole sets of them, made entire, bridal party sets of these things and made tons of money. And it's something that it was not in our wheelhouse. And if I were really going to get into it, I would want to market specifically that bridal market, show more of that work. And I'll say, funny enough, we actually had to stop showing some of that work because as a business-to-business decoration house where I worked, making custom dress inserts and stuff like that, we could do it. We made some fabric, some yardage that was sublimated for the inside of somebody's dress off of a China pattern, I believe, from like her great-grandmother. We made this incredible fabric, but making yardage as someone who is used to making desktop sublimation pieces and we having to piece it together or having to print these large spans that we weren't made to print. We weren't fabric people. We were t-shirt people and hat people. That actually ended up being something that wasn't good for us because when we looked at our costs, we couldn't make money at it. We ended up sending them to other people who made more money at it. But some of the work, like the bridal shirts, like the favors, stuff like that, really did make a lot of money for us. So it depends on what your costs are. That's why you have to know those costs. And I'll go ahead and share one more comment before I keep going. Fanny says, a customer ordered names for baby items as a gift. She now sells personalized baby boxes. She orders fancy luxury boxes with the name also printed on the box and just adds value to the embroidered items. Absolutely. Go back and see. I've got an entire episode about value, perceived value versus actual value. And there is a lot of value to be had. You can throw 38 cents of packaging at something and make it worth 10 times as much sometimes. It depends on the context. You have to have the experience for when someone opens it, the context in which it's sold to them, what it's partnered with, the event that it's meant for, because when things are more meaningful to someone, like weddings, if they are once-in-a-lifetime events, I know we're having trouble with events right now, but even if, let's say, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing you want to celebrate, even as we are separated right now where we can't have events, graduation stuff is worth a lot more than stuff you do during the rest of the year. Is it actually harder for you to decorate? Not really, but people are willing to spend on big events. So you have to remember that what people are willing to spend it's between their ears. It's something that they're thinking of. It's a perception that they have. Let's go ahead and get back to some shop styles, stuff like that. So we'll go back and talk about shop styles. I want to just briefly go through some things. The first thing is to answer a question somebody asked me. They said, should you be a one-stop shop? The shops that I worked at were what I would call one-stop shops in that we had multiple decoration utilities. We could screen print, sublimate, embroider. We had cut vinyl. We had signage. We had wide format printing. All of this was under one window, but it kind of grew as we grew our base of people. And in a business-to-business context, there's a lot of people who want to have one invoice and get all of their decoration work done. The thing is, being a one-stop shop doesn't necessarily mean you have to pull in all of this equipment and do it yourself. A lot of us who are creative want all the toys. Believe me, right now I am suffering because I want more toys. I want more things that I can do. When I see people with equipment that I don't have, believe me, I want it. As a creative person who wants to ply that equipment, believe me, I want it. It doesn't mean you always have to have it. You can still be a kind of one-stop shop by being the source and the solution provider, the consultant to your client. So one thing I'm always going to tell you guys, even if you're just doing embroidery right now, If you partner with somebody else and you're the one who handles the communication and you understand how to get what your end customer needs from someone else, that is a value add anyway. That doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong, adding some value to that or getting some money for that service. You're handling communications. You know how to get what you want. You know how to speak for the customer and make sure they get what they need. That's a value add there. You are spending your time. You are spending your effort. You know things that they don't. That's still valuable. So you can outsource to make yourself more of a one-stop shop, or you can do that in-house. These are both options that you have, but the thing that's important really isn't about should you be your one-stop shop or not. It's more about should you do it in-house or not, and do you have the audience? You need to build the audience of customers. You need to build the segment and have the understanding of what people need in order to grow. It's the same thing that I say anytime somebody asks me, should I add printing? I love the idea of adding at least basic heat printing to embroidery. I love having a heat press, maybe sublimation, definitely some sort of cutter so you can do heat press vinyl. Heat press vinyl plus, or heat press materials of any kind, applique materials plus embroidery is super classic. It's a great combination that gives you kind of immediate ability to print things that are lighter that you wouldn't want to put embroidery on necessarily, and to do embroidery. And they combine well to make cool multimedia stuff. So I love those together. So I'll say I usually think it's not a huge risk, but it's a great idea to work on that as a market before you buy into a bunch of equipment. And certainly if you're going to buy into the more expensive versions of stuff like direct to garment printers, you need to work into that market and probe the people you're already selling to, because selling into a market, you already have people who have made the tip with you, who have gone past the point of purchase with you, is going to be easier always than making a new market. And if you don't have an audience, you just want to play with the technology, then that's not probably the best reason to bring in, new equipment. Can you do it? Absolutely. There's certain things that I think people really just, if you want to do it, it's your purpose in life, it's something you want to do, that makes it different. That makes it a different value to you. But when someone asks me, should I bring in printing, especially when they're saying I'm spending too much on the printing shop, I'm like, well, are you making money or not? Number one. Number two, does it feel like you're spending too much? Or do you think that the amount of labor and learning and everything that it's going to cost you is worthwhile to try and bring more of the profit margin in-house? And you have to really look at some numbers for that. And you have to think about it before you do it. Like I said, I love certain things, so I want to do them myself. I digitized a lot of stuff I probably should have outsourced because I love digitizing. And I think everybody should have the ability to create their own work. I think digitizing and editing software is a no-brainer for embroiderers. However, it doesn't mean that you should spend all of your time digitizing if that's not your profit center. It doesn't mean you should go to printing and buy an expensive printer if no one has asked you for print or you haven't tried to build a market for print. I think that just makes sense. So, one-stop shop, you can. It's not necessary for you to be valuable. I have used that tactic to help businesses who are trying to have an easier time with things come onto my shop, because they would say, I have to deal with all this stuff. And I'm saying, how about this? You make one order with me. At the end of the road, you get promotional products, printed products, embroidered products. I ship them. I package them. They're ready to distribute. I make their life very easy. They have one contact person. That makes them happy. That's the argument for the one-stop shop for me, is causing less friction for your customer. So that's the one-stop shop. For me, that's what I always think about. So that's something that people really, love. So that's what I'm thinking. It's how it should be, and it makes a difference here. So certainly we can explore more stuff, and I think it's useful, but you need to be ready for the concept that it's going to cost something to you, that you're going to have to develop the market. Absolutely great to have stuff like Vitor says, great digitizer himself. Sequencer, a different add-on for embroidery, should explore more beads and etc. Absolutely. What I'm going to say is, if you just want to play with sequins, buying the sequin machine may or may not be valuable to you. I would say you then need to go out, make samples, show it to people, and show that work so that it gets picked up. And you have to be able to make the case to people. Absolutely. Yeah. And like Matthew says here, babe, I need to buy a wife. No, you don't need a brand new Happy. I know that's the same thing. It's hard because there are always cool things to add. There's always things that you can do and that you can add. The thing is, I would always make a market for it. And the great thing is, you can often dip your toes by outsourcing first. We got into rhinestones. We started out having someone do all the design work for the rhinestones, and then we ended up where I did the design work for the rhinestones. But we started out by outsourcing all the stuff first. We outsourced to people who make rhinestone transfers and built that into the costs. And we got the market together for people. We started showing those samples in our shop. And then we never went to the point. We decided we never had enough of that business to go get a bunch of equipment. But the next step would be Now that we've got that equipment in and we're pretty competent as designers and we know what we're doing with it, and we have a market of people who are used to getting it from us, we can bring that in-house and offer that as a service and then say, I can do it in-house. I can get the turnaround faster. We have the creative control and we can make what we want to make for you. So that's the thing. Think about how it's going to add to your ability to deliver to the client. If outsourcing adds that without you bringing the equipment, it might not be necessary. But that's the thing. It's about markets. It's about looking for your market. If you're home decor, yeah, you probably want, you're doing, like I said, you're doing decor fabrics, you're doing stuff for upholstery, you're doing stuff like that. You're doing curtains. You probably want a sash frame, a wide format machine. You probably want cording. You probably want attachments. You probably want sequins and beading, because these kind of finishes are really what's going to make you able to do what your customer base needs from you. You want to do high-end home decor, that's a thing. However, it is one of those things that may not be for you. If you only do business to business, you only do construction, if that is your niche and you've decided that I do construction and services and trades, sequins and beads probably aren't your game. And if you add sequins and beads, you're going to have to absolutely justify a market to whom you're going to sell that. So it really depends for you. But I mean, I love doing rhinestone work. I've done a lot of custom design rhinestone stuff. But for me, it made sense to have someone who was really excellent at making transfers, who had an awesome source of really great stones, to make those transfers for me, even if I was doing the creative work on the first hand. So friendly partners certainly helps. And I would say, yeah, this is Vitor again. Finding friendly partners is excellent. I give sublimation to a friend and he sends me embroidery people. Absolutely. Make up that dream team, vet some people and do that together. But that's the thing. Knowing that, you can then sell the print to your people. You can now sell printing to your embroidery customers, knowing that you have that resource behind you. And you can also partner up where if you want to with your partner, that partner can say, we offer embroidery, that you could say, I offer sublimation, and not necessarily reveal the brand behind it. And you can make that agreement, but it's something, once again, you need to communicate about and talk about ahead of time. So let's go with a few more shop styles here that I want to talk about. Already discussed this, custom decorator. That's the standard. People are bringing things in. They have an image in mind. They're going to have you do it. Another one I like to call the gift shop, or the boutique decorator. Someone comes in and they want to present a gift. The item is very important. It's not that we have a commodity item. It's that the item, the gift itself, is very important. And we are going to add a decoration. They probably don't have art in mind. They do know kind of what they wanted, or they might have art in mind, but mostly it's going to be personalization, or maybe stock designs plus. And we can curate that stock design collection. We can make those designs ourselves, but the item is more important perhaps. Whereas custom decorator, it's like we have staple items we want. We want polo shirts, we want jackets, we want staple items that have a function. But the importance here is in the decoration, the logo, the art. This one may be that the item itself is more important. And we have to present something that's interesting. And in this, packaging, presentation, and making it presentable as a gift might be more important. Mobile or event decoration. And I'm calling mobile decoration here, but I think event decoration, especially now that events are often online, may be a little bit of a different thing. This is where we're decorating for a specific event. It's usually gated by time. We may do some on site, especially back before we were doing all of the stuff we're doing now. Either on site or during an event, we might have a specific display or something else going on. However, we may then use that as a lead generator to take orders down the road, to take normal orders that can't be done during this space of the event. Uniform shops, uniform and scrub shops. If you're able to source these garments, what you might end up doing also is becoming a garment source. You can turn your work in sourcing garments and getting accounts into being a source for the kind of garments that are needed for, like I said, construction, trades. I did a lot of healthcare, and you can even do this as I am a person who handles uniforming. So I'm going to be able to find size sets. I'm going to be able to handle getting you that source. But part of my uniforming career here, part of my uniforming offer, my value is making sure I can do name patches, badges, and detail stuff, the kind of logo stuff that you would do it as a custom decorator. But I'm primarily centered on uniforms with that customization as being part of it. Different kind of focus, very similar to a custom decorator. In-house or partnership, this is kind of a weird thing. I've actually seen some decorators become it is almost like a symbiotic relationship where they work in-house or in close partnership as a supplier for a larger or national company. This doesn't happen all that often, but it is something that decorators can do, or they can get jobs doing if they're not working in their own decoration shops. It can be that sometimes a commissary or a clearinghouse of goods that's based inside of a larger corporation needs an in-house decorator of some kind. Partnership can also happen with all kinds of businesses, like people who supply gear, uniforms, clothing, but who want that in-house partnership or that in-store event partnership. Very similar to the fashion stuff I said earlier. It can be temporary or it can be permanent, and it might be where you can co-locate if that's the kind of thing we're talking about. These days, like I said, very different because we're not out shopping in stores the same way we were, but it is still an opportunity to look for, or something to look for with people who have a clientele that are super into personalization, who want custom things added to, say, maybe branded gear that's important, or like I said with uniforms, functional gear where the functionality of the actual garment itself is important and necessary for their work or necessary for their play, for the thing they like to do. Monogrammers and personalizers. Yes, I know it's not in every city, not in every state, not in every region necessarily. I know in the American South is where there's the hugest amount of monogramming going on. Certainly that's been my experience, but monogramming can be everything, like I said, from high-end fashion down to everyday gear. And there is an entire cadre of people who all they do is monogramming. And part of the difference with monogrammers is that they have generally a really good selection of monogram specific, especially position dependent, meaning like the letters look different depending on what position in the monogram that they are. Monogrammers actually have a selection of fonts that are usually curated and important, and they have to have nice quality fonts, and they can be everything, including things that are done for small stuff like apparel and large stuff like home decor, sheets, pillows, curtains. Monogramming is its own thing, and knowing a lot about it and being able to add decorative pieces and designs to it, or have frames or that collection of curated monogram work, or doing designed custom monogram work, can make you specifically part of that market. There are lots of people who are also doing classic historically based monograms where they're doing their own digitizing and they are custom made to the client, or at least modified for the client. So monogrammer is totally a different ball of wax than necessarily just doing name drops and patches and uniform work. Another one, craft fair. This is where you're doing like pre-decorated things that you are selling. Now you're more of a retail store. You may also use this as lead generation for custom work or for modified personalized work, where you attend an event or you make a store, whether it is e-commerce store direct or it's through something like Etsy, where you are making pre-decorated items that you are curating or selecting or creating designs for. But you may also have, as a sidebar to this, personalized versions of these designs, personalized items in general. But you're generally, I call it craft fair because when I deal with people doing this, back in the day, this was the classic use for this. They wanted specifically saleable items that worked for the craft fair table, but then also were using this usually as a lead generator to do some custom work as well. And this could be anything from the classic, the classic stuff that we know in all forms of decoration, like patches and emblems. They are fantastic non-sized items that make money that can be used in just about every segment I just discussed. Patches as an item are incredibly versatile, but you can also end up with all sorts of decorated items in the hoop stuff, keychains and key fobs, freestanding lace items, things like this, and they can go more to a craft fair market. They can also go to a holiday market, stuff like that. It's another form of decoration, but it's still embroidery. It's still the same kind of stuff. There's still the possibility for customized work involved as well. Then last couple of ones before we get into other segments, we have like fashion customizers. Like I said previously, this is where we are dealing with a store, we're dealing with a brand, somebody who's going to do some of that marketing, and we're going to either do custom curated designs that they've helped us put together, or we are adding something custom that they have signed on to, or personalizers, and that just means we are doing names. We're doing name drops, we're monogramming something else. So we're crossing over these borders, but with this one, I'm really talking about names, and this can be anything from, in the sports industry, this is really classic for doing I almost would consider this to a degree to be like letter jacket work. If you know Letterman's or varsity jacket work, frequently you're going to be ordering and designing patches, attaching those patches, putting a big name on the back, probably some text on the front, or customizing the chenille patches themselves. You can be as involved or uninvolved in some of these processes as you want. You can be ordering all this stuff and stitching it on aside from the names. You can be ordering it all whole cloth. You can have a chenille machine, be creating your own chenille. There's multiple ways to get into that when you're talking about letter jackets, but when you're talking about personalizing, this is name drop stuff. This is having a nice curated set of fonts, either being on site or off, doesn't matter, but you're doing name drops. You're adding names and personalization specifically to garments. And often in this case, I'm talking about fashion stuff. This is when you have another brand you're working with. And these are all different kinds of segments that we can work in. So when I want you to think about all these different ways you might work, right? It just depends on what you're looking for when you're looking for that audience. There are different audiences. These are all embroidery though. Any one of you with an embroidery machine can touch any of these. Any of these things that we've talked about, you can get into in some fashion. So I think it's worthwhile. So, I like to talk about that stuff. And certainly, I'll say this, hey guys, LOL, in-house is real here. It's all done in my house. And here's the thing, this year, above all the years, this year, this 12-month period, if you want to call it that, the pandemic has taught us a lot about the difference between cottage industry and big corporations. Isn't always that you can think of one as more professional than another. I cannot tell you how many times I saw my big companies leaning on people working out of their bedrooms because the people working in their bedrooms were able to keep working safely, who were isolated while they couldn't open their big shops. There are reasons why all of these things are valid. I say this all the time when we talk about fitness. It's kind of like evolution in animals. You're fit for a particular environment, and that environment can change around you. And so trust me, home-based shops, cottage-based shops, you guys are real, you're embroiderers, and you deserve to be part of the discussion. I'm not one of the commercial people who's going to say you do craft and you're out. That's ridiculous. If you're into this because you love the embroidery, number one, then you're like me, we're friends. If you're in this and you're trying to make some money and you're trying to make either a living or you're trying to fund yourself with it, then you're somebody who I would love to talk about marketing and selling with. So absolutely. And it's one of those things. And I will talk about a couple of things here first. Marianne says, my business creating embroidery has always been in my studio for the past 20 years. Works for me. And I love that I've been able to do this. Absolutely. I offer like 5 fonts for Monogram. I have tons more, but it works for me. Curation of fonts, stuff that works, that looks good is fantastic, especially if you're concerned about it. Everybody always says, but I have so many more. Why don't I offer them all? People get analysis or paralysis by analysis. They see a big giant page full of fonts, and then they're going to take a lot of your time selecting. For the people who aren't that concerned, they're going to see one of the 5 fonts, pick one and go. For the people who don't see what they want, you can go ahead and say, when you see them struggling with it, or when you discuss it with them and they struggle or ask for something else, you can give them the keys to the kingdom and show them every font that you have if you want to. There's always the option of adding more options, either whether it's garments or fonts to your client's interaction. There's never a way to take it back once you throw the whole book in front of them. Start with your curated collection that you know and love, that you know works, and also that you know runs well on your machine and doesn't take any extra time. Think about your efficiency on that. And then when that doesn't work, if that doesn't work, you can add to that. You can add to that stuff. So it's one of those things that people will love, is to know that you're a solution creator, but when they start with you, give them something clear to understand first. If they don't see what they like, you can always add more. Curate first and then offer more. I think it's a great way to do that. Justin says, so much wonderful information. My head is swimming with the possibilities. I haven't figured out my niche yet. Embroidering a lot of items, making handmade items, embroidering on them, putting them out there with my Facebook page to see what people want. Sure, that's a great thing to do. I mean, sometimes you have to throw stuff out there that sticks. Just make sure you're making stuff that makes sense. Think about scale. Imagine what happens tomorrow if somebody orders 20 of these things. If somebody orders 100 of these things, if somebody orders 1,000 of these things, what will I do? I will say that I've seen a lot of people who want to do handmade stuff, and handmade stuff is great, but you got to charge quite a bit for it. And imagine what it's going to look like if it takes off. Not that you shouldn't do it, but imagine what it's going to look like if it takes off and see what makes sense to you so you can price it accordingly. I've seen people who have these really incredible ideas, but they take so much labor to achieve that they may not be worthwhile. And it's funny, I used to judge a lot of embroidery contests. When I judge these contests, I would look at some of the designs and go, you know what? That is a lovely design. It is so stitch dense, so difficult to run. It takes so many trims and color changes that you couldn't sell it. It wasn't commercially viable. So do think about that. I always tell people, think about what things are going to cost, and you don't have to keep gilding the lily. Sometimes you've made something wonderful and you don't need to add to get to where you need to have value. You've got the value in it. But if you have something unique that fills a niche that people aren't addressing, if you have something that's addressing that itch people already have, you're answering a problem they have, you have a good chance of getting more value out of it anyway. Marianne says, selling virtual on Facebook, do a small video, it gets people looking. Absolutely. Plus, even if you're tired of seeing embroidery run, trust me, a lot of people aren't. Show a little bit of your process. Talk about who you are and what you do. Show that process. Show the fact that you are creating, and then go ahead and run that stuff out. Show the example, but also show it in stitches. Don't just do mock-ups. The reality of the thing is important to people. Mock-ups are cheap for a reason. I'm not saying don't do mock-ups. I am saying that seeing something in the thread moving on a video is powerful. So think about that too. So, and yes, Marianne says, I have these 5 fonts embroidered and framed. They choose from there. Absolutely. Sample books. I can show you pictures of the sample books I used to use. We had, not only did we have fonts in the sample book, I would have some thread choices in the sample book, sizes of text. So it made it easier for people to describe when they were doing names and personalization, how big they wanted something, and different treatments, including things like 3D foam and applique. So they could see what that was, because to us, applique means a thing. It doesn't always mean the same thing to everybody. I had somebody come in to me once and say, yeah, you know, I want to get that shirt embroidered. And I'm looking at them with their little t-shirts and going, really, you want to get this shirt embroidered, this design? It's a big, heavy design. I go, yeah, I want that one where you embroider it with the paint. Screen printing. Yes, let me take you to the salesperson for that. Anyway, that's how that stuff works. And by the way, this is awesome information from Matt. Thank you, Matt, for showing this. I'm actually going to show something else of yours in a second. On my Instagram, I have a featured stories for Behind the Needle that just shows the process. It has the most views, and it will. The process is still interesting to people, and no matter how much work you do, they love to see your friendly embroidery robot stitching things out for you. Trust me, they love it. I still watch people's process videos, and I've been in this long enough to get gray. So trust me, it's still something people want to watch, and seeing your process and then seeing the finished piece, super awesome. And yeah, I almost died, Mike. Embroider with paint. Screen printers don't even like that term. Call ink paint in front of screen printer and see what happens to you. It's not fun. Can you do that one where you embroider it with paint? Not really, but I know what you meant. Let me help you out, guys. You have to remember that people don't know the things we know. They're not initiated into our terminology, folks. They don't know what's going on. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some more of this stuff, right? I've talked about all these different options of how you can operate, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the different kind of things we can do. I mean, I talked about personalizers. I talked about how we can sell. Personalizers, gift shops, they're going to use things like customized template designs. The only reason I mention this is just to say that there is a level of design work. It's like everything else. There's a spectrum. There's the fully custom design that's going on where it's absolutely custom. It is, everything is being handed to you as art, and it's going to come out as embroidery, and you're the entire connection between these two things. And then there's the other side of it where we are dealing with, stock designs with no customization on them. We're going to take something out of a book. We're going to slap it on the garment. That's it. And somewhere here in the middle are customized template designs where we make a design where we have some customization in it. We might have envelopes so that we can shape text inside of an area, and we're going to drop the text in. Anyone who has seen a bog standard sports design for team sports has seen a customized template design. They are valuable, and I think that there's something to that for the people who don't want to do custom design work but don't want to feel like they don't have something that looks like everybody else's. Customized templates is very useful. Other kinds of things I want to talk about briefly. Everybody asking about e-commerce, because I've done a ton of e-commerce, and there's another thing to say about this. E-commerce doesn't have to be a direct copy of your brick and mortar operation. People think that they want it like that. You'll have people who are entirely custom decorators who do everything whole cloth, like I just explained, where someone's bringing them art and telling they want garments, and they're doing everything in between. That's like e-commerce full custom. It's actually a lot harder to pull off. This is where we're going to have art approvals and uploads and stitch counts dealt with and colors. And this can be quite a lot to deal with. And you really kind of need tools that are made for the industry for this to go off very easily. E-commerce full custom is one thing, right? That is where someone's going to come with their idea and want to customize it and get it all set up and give you a bunch of information. And especially if you're trying to show it live on a garment or anything like that, that kind of stuff is fairly difficult, fairly high technology, might cost you a bit to get set up. But then there's something like the company store. E-commerce company stores are incredibly valuable and can be made with fairly bog standard e-commerce suites. You don't have to get past, say, WooCommerce to do a company store, because a company store is made with pre-decorated items, and you may not have to have things like live previewing of name drops. You can still do some customization. If you're doing something for a customer who has a company but wants their individual employees to order, but you need to maybe drop names on it, you can show mocked up garments or pre-decorated garments that have the one logo we're sharing, or maybe the couple logo options we're sharing on the few colors that are allowed. We now have this smaller curated option. We don't have to have a live designing suite there. We don't have to have embroidery software built into the website necessarily, and we can still produce a company store. Do the e-commerce stores that are specific to our industry work a little better? Absolutely. They're going to be easier to handle. We can do things like upload embroidery designs and have it make our own mock-ups immediately. But the e-commerce company store is really just a branded pre-printed store that is specific to one of our clients, and we can sell the labor we put into that as a service. So when people think about e-commerce as one of the valuable ways we can handle things, e-commerce can be something that doesn't require us to replicate our entire custom decoration shop. And it can be branded specifically to the business we're targeting rather than being necessarily part of our brand. Great for it to link back to our brand for people to understand that we did the work, but having it be very comfortable for the end user, which is going to be like the employees and lovers of this company, of their brand, means that they get a little bit of a more custom experience for themselves. And like I said, we can sell it to them as a service and maybe even an ongoing subscription type service that we create. So it's just an option to think about. The other thing is e-commerce can also be a curated line. You may have a full custom design shop. You may be a full custom decoration shop, but your e-commerce essentially on the custom side amounts to a contact form where they can upload some art and you're going to get back in touch with them. You can start there, certainly, and have the actual sales of items be a retail-style curated line, like the lines we talked about before, where you do have your own set of garments that you did the design work on, and it's your design, it's your clever idea, or it's your resort wear, your other line that might actually be separate from your custom line. So e-commerce doesn't necessarily have to be a replication of your entire capabilities to be valuable. You can make a store, even a store that doesn't share your brand or is branded differently specifically to the e-commerce, that you're still running, you're still decorating to fulfill, but is not your whole store. And in fact, that's the thing, I'm showing the same image again, but that's the thing that this was. When I talked about that in niche marketing, we ran a store that was these folk music tote bags. That's all it was. Behind that store was a full custom business-to-business decoration shop. But this store made money of its own and was an e-commerce unit and did its all fulfillment out of that shop, but was not necessarily related to that shop. And it's the same thing that I've done for company stores. I'll actually show you a couple. They're ones that I used to run and don't run anymore, but are still alive at the original shop I worked at. This was one of the ones I originally built. Now, this is not the current version of it is not one that I built for real estate. And all of these garments are specifically, this is licensed. This is something where you had to become a licensed person to be a partner. But this stuff was all done and decorated for Keller Williams, and that's a retail client. Well, that's the thing. This is all a store that's for them. Do you see the decoration shop behind it? Not really, but they are doing all the fulfillment. They are handling that decoration. Same thing here and one of the things that I talked about is doing medical. Well, this emergency medicine store, this store is a bog standard, off the shelf, without a lot of customization store. This store is not something that has to run through a fully, industry specific store template. This is just a selling template for garments. So all it really has to have is, sizes, quantities, colors. It still has to do that. It still has to have preview images, but these things are all handled like you would for any sort of custom line of apparel. So it's something like a preprint line. It doesn't have to be that you replicate everything that you can do in your e-commerce branding. So it's something to think about. It's something to really consider, right? So something worth doing. And frankly, some people will look at that and say, okay, but that means I have to run this whole separate item. You do, but most of the facilities that you're running are things you would be doing anyway. And once it gets set up, it doesn't necessarily run like a separate entity. What you may have is a separate email, separate phone line if you're doing phone, any sort of phone call, stuff like that, where you may have to bring that in, and you can do that digitally with VoIP. You can run a separate entity from your full shop and have it not necessarily look like the full shop to everybody. I don't think it's disingenuous at all. It just shows that you've got a separate brand. There are lots of companies that have different brand silos. You can do that too. So you can have two different stores. Even if you're a single proprietor, you can have two different stores that have very different branding that go for different audiences, that target those audiences individually and make things make sense for the audience. So it's something worth looking at. You don't have to replicate everything you do in your online stores. And I'm going to go ahead and jump on some of these other comments we have because I love this stuff. Somebody says, you're spot on to deciding for oneself, charged by thread count or not. We're selling and providing our art, and that should be considered in the pricing for most times. Absolutely. Your value is what you can provide to people. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be doing that. You're going to charge specifically by the input of time or of stitch count or of materials. That is not the only way to increase value. There are multiple ways to increase value, and the perceived value, the value that somebody gets out of you, matters. And Here's something too. One nice thing about Etsy from Greg. When someone likes something you have listed, you can delve into all their likes and see if there are common denominators for a niche you can create a supply for. Absolutely. Do research. And also look at retail research. I always say that, guys. Go consume a lot of things broadly and see what's out there. Get a feeling for what's out there and see if you fit into that niche. Or the other thing you'll see, don't copy someone else's niche that you see being filled there. Look and see, is there a niche that's being missed? Or maybe is there a niche that I have identified? I can see people are spending money all around it, but they aren't getting the thing they actually want, and they're asking for something that the people aren't producing. That's a great way to go. Brian Bailey, Creative and Brilliance, and thank you for watching it all while we're talking about all this stuff. But he says, I think embroidery with paint is tattoo, which, funny enough, that makes me laugh because I always call it a thread tattoo when someone is not particularly careful and throws their hand under the needle. I say, looks like you got yourself a thread tattoo there when I see those horrible x-rays. So sorry, folks. But, yeah, I know. And by the way, color reel. Yeah, I know. Color reel, guys. I will probably talk about this at some point. I want to talk about new technologies and different technologies people are employing. Color reel is an on-machine thread dyeing system. Myself and Brian Bailey, actually, we've had long discussions about why it makes sense and why it doesn't, and what it costs. And I also, by the way, I managed to get kind of chided by the people from Color Reel because I tried to take pictures of the inside of their machine. I didn't know that I was doing something bad, but they sure slapped that cover closed real fast. So if you go back and look at Images Magazine, I'm one of the first people that actually did an interview as a digitizer about Color Reel. And I said, it's really interesting. Here are the things that I'm not sure it'll work for. So they might not love me, though they have asked me to come look at stuff also. But yeah, it's people say, should we add something like Color Reel? Mike says, oh, it's a dirty word. I'm not sold. I've only seen videos. Can't imagine adding something like that. I have a sample literally in my pocket right now. I keep forgetting to take it out of my wallet because I brought it to show somebody. Color Reel's gradients are very interesting, but I worry about having all the problems of an inkjet printer with all the problems of an embroidery machine put together. Doesn't sound like fun to me, but we'll see. We'll have to see how they. If you've ever done sublimation, and I've done lots of it, I don't love the idea that I'm dealing with a sublimation printer stapled to an embroidery machine. We'll have to see how that works. And without commenting on it, I would love it if it works the way they say it works. And it's reliable. There's some very interesting things you can do with kind of like rapid prototyping with thread, fashion sampling, stuff like that. There's really interesting things you can do. Also, because we're in a world of, print on demand digital work, it might be that depending on how things are done with it, you can add some really interesting effects to embroidery that make it more like digital, more like print on demand. But it is very, very dicey to me. But let's jump into a couple other comments before I finish out here. Matt says, my first 2 years were only USAF flight suit name patches. So it was mainly 6 designs, different wings, and just slap a new name on it, $8 each, and required 2 to buy, easy money. Absolutely. And actually, I'm going to talk about that with patches, guys. Somebody specifically came to me and said, you can't make money on patches, on short-run patches. After, by the way, I've made a bunch of money on short-run patches. Matt here has made a bunch of money on short-run patches. Jeff's made a bunch of money on short-run patches. You absolutely can make money on patches. And I'm actually going to show a post that Matt shared with people over at the Embroidery Nerd group. Once again, go check out the Embroidery Nerd group. They're really great guys over there. But let's go ahead and show this post because I think it's worthwhile. And this is from Matt here, who just talked about the flight suit patches. And he says this. I'm actually going to read the little post on here. If you're wondering where the easy money is in embroidery, try patches. This is $132 worth. It took about 2 minutes to digitize and transfer, hour or so for embroidery, and maybe an hour to cut and sew Velcro. That's about $44 an hour. Yeah, guys, emblems are fantastic. And I also like them as part of company programs because it's a non-sized item that usually is cheap enough to add on for most people. And lots of people find reasons for them. It's currently a look that people really enjoy. Patch caps have hung on for a while. I wrote my first article defending patches on hats and patches in general as the new wave of patches, even though they were done before. The new wave of patches. I wrote that article 6 years ago, and that trend has really hung on. People like the look of patches, and honestly, patches, badges, and emblems have been in several places, whether it's fire and police and military, which is classic. Now it is everywhere, including fashion, including home decor. Everywhere is using patches or emblems somewhere. And so I would say there is no reason to think that you can't make patches work. And if you understand how much labor you have into them, like we see here, Matt says how much labor he's got into it, how much time he spent on it, what it's taking him to cut out. He's got this down to a science. He knows what it's going to cost, and he's charging accordingly. They can absolutely be valuable. And I'll say the same thing for me. The other reason people kind of looked at me and said, oh, man, you sound like you're charging a lot for patches. Well, let's talk about my primary reason to use patches. The primary reason I did patches was for film. Film and television people wanted patches, and they wanted them in very quick turnaround. They wanted them produced in-house in very small numbers. Some of my patch designs, despite the fact that the digitizing took hours, I would make 1 to 4 pieces. And absolutely, I was getting hundreds of dollars for these patches. Trust me, quite a lot per hour, more even than that. Why is it? Because we were providing a solution for a problem they had. They needed military, police, fire responder patches for shows that were related to that. I did Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, The Night Shift. Those are some of the ones that were really big. Soldado movie, the second one. There was a bunch of different badges I did for all those folks. And especially when the TV show had, like I said, Night Shift was all police, fire, EMS. Every single person had 4 patches on them. And then we did stuff like martial arts episodes where there were tons of those patches. People would come to us because we were willing and able to do the in-house turnaround on it. I was digitizing them in-house, so we had creative on board. We could turn them around quickly. And I was making small runs, which a lot of people said couldn't be done because they were used to outsourcing them to large emblem houses. Doing emblems in large runs, I would absolutely send it out if I had time. Doing it for the movies for TV, it made sense to them, and it was worth a lot to them because it was time sensitive, and it was something that they were thinking of as a one-off piece for apparel, not for apparel, but for costuming for wardrobe. It's a different market. Your market may vary. Are you all going to make the same amount of money on patches, either as myself or as Matt? No, not necessarily. But if you look to the markets for whom they are vital to their work and valuable, and if you provide either a creative outlet or a method of doing them that's different, or you just happen to be the person for whom it's the easiest to get them from, you can have more value in them than you think. There are going to be people who look at you and say, I can go order that patch here for $5. And they're going to be showing you a bog standard patch that somebody has made hundreds of thousands of in a year, like a flag patch. You show them what the differences are. Part of what we have to do is educate customers, where we tell them, your artwork is custom. Your patch is something that is unique to you. You only have this many pieces. They're not being made years and years on end with the same setup and files. And your custom bespoke work that I make just for you is definitely supposed to cost more than a flag patch from a country that people are making hundreds of thousands of and have them sitting dusty on a shelf, ready to ship to you. There is some of that stuff that is absolutely valuable. Plus, I'm telling you right now, patches are absolutely a valuable thing to do. No matter what you're in, trust me, you're in team sports, patches. You're in, like I said, you're in team sports, you're in fashion, you're in normal decoration, business to business, uniforming particularly. I did my first patch stuff was all because I was doing actual fire and police uniform work. And the other thing I did small run stuff as examples that then got taken up by the county sheriff's department. And then all the designs that I created for which we got paid for the creative work and the digitizing, we then outsourced to larger emblem companies to produce them at scale for everybody. There are different ways to handle this that are not just there. And I did tons of motorcycle club work, some good work, some bad work. I didn't know all of it at the time. Not that everybody was, maybe not everybody was probably the most legal that I did over the course of my career, but a lot of people were. And eventually I did a lot of stuff that was for kind of legitimate clubs, if you want to call it that. But yeah, motorcycle patches are awesome. And they are very willing to spend quite a lot of their patches in art because it means a lot to them. The identification, the affinity they have to their brand, whatever brand you want to call it, including motorcycle clubs, the affinity to the brand increases that value of the item, especially if you are willing and able to produce the kind of patch they want, that gives them the utility they want, that takes seriously what they love. So that's something you have to think about when you're looking at your audiences, once again. So here's the thing. Let's go ahead and grab a couple more people who are saying that. Certainly, Mike, I'm having trouble finding an e-commerce web store solution in Canada. Apparently you speak a different language up here. I don't want to build my own stores from scratch. Willing and accepting tips to explore. I'm going to be honest and say that I don't have a tip immediately for you on this one. I'm going to call out to the wisdom of the crowd here. If any of you are working in Canada and have a good sense of what you need from Mike, absolutely hit us up in the comments and let us know. I had some issues with Canada before, and I'll tell you this, I did have a solution that was working across the border. The problem I had was that I couldn't get the catalog suppliers in Canada to give me updated information fast enough. And so everything I did was running out of time. So it was like we could not keep it up to date, and it ended up being difficult. So you end up building more than you want to. Justin says, this is what I have the hardest time with, pricing. People see something I made and ask how much to create it for them. And sometimes I just think, I have to think hard and get back to them. This is something where establishing a baseline and understanding how much work you put into something and how much you need to get out of it to end up at the price you want to get to is important. Look my name up in pricing, and there's tons of me talking about it in a commercial sense, but it should still make sense for you. How much overhead you're running, what it costs for you to do your work, and how much time everything does will give you your base, which I always call the minimum to maintain, which is the minimum to keep you doing what you're doing unimpeded. And then after that, we have to figure out how much profit you want to make, and you should be wanting to make profit. Sonia says, my niche now, homeschool badges and riding the trend wave of embroidered long sleeve bridal gloves. Cool. Absolutely. Keep a watch on it. Get on Pinterest, get on Instagram, get on TikTok, see what's cool. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying this stuff out and seeing what other people are making. And I love how Matt says this, because I've said something very similar to people before. You might not be able to make money on small patch orders. The next person who will make them will. I'll say this, being willing to make orders that a lot of other shops won't in a location absolutely can help you. Not for the money other people want, but when they literally just say, yeah, we don't make 5 patches. Tell somebody, instead of just saying no, say, well, we usually don't make 5 patches, but if we do, that means each patch is going to cost X amount of money. And if you know how much that is, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people out there who go, well, it's more than I want to pay, but is it different for 10? What does this mean? Or they just say, okay, I want them. You'd be surprised. I've done it quite a lot. Mike says in its current form, no matter what the color of people say, it only work on stuff. It doesn't matter what the color changes. No way it can adequately do corporate logos without solving the color change point. Sorry, not sorry. They say there's a way of handling underlay in there. Like I said, we'll handle this in another show. I probably shouldn't have clicked that one. I do want to talk about new technology, so I'm going to put that on the list for something we're going to discuss later. And absolutely with this one, Jeff, the mechanic name patch is iconic. I think people like those hats. Something that reminds them of a simpler time. My dad is a mechanic. And I talk about this when I talk about how classic patches are. I've done some articles talking about patches, and the patch cap is iconic. And especially for America, I think it's an Americana thing too. This concept of the mechanic's patch, the service person with the patch, the name badge on the chest, and it says, and it kind of speaks to us of this kind of trustworthiness. And it's something that a lot of people do. So Jeff says here, low run patches are where it's at. A lot of places won't touch them. You charge more for them. Something custom, and people only want 1 or 3 only pay for. Look at motorcycle clubs. They pay for the work that goes into patches. Love doing those. Absolutely. And they are fantastically detailed and fun to do if you're creative. I've done incredible work for bike patches. I've shown quite a few of them. I've got a stack of back patches right now. I need to cut and marrow in front and love that stuff. Yes. And like I said, they pay a lot. And if you're creative and cool about it, you can make really cool stuff. And this is true. Patch and pin collectors. It's another place to think about it. Patch and pin collectors. The item itself becomes more valuable because collectors exist. Matt says there are patch collector groups where people will pay $200 plus for a single patch. We only make 50 of them. I've yet to get to that level. Yeah, totally. It just depends, right? Just depends. And Greg says patches paid off my new machine in 4 months instead of 2 years. Well, you heard it here, folks. Like I said, we're going to talk about patches some more. I've got a class coming up. I'm working with Aaron Montgomery about it. I've taught some patch classes. In fact, Jeff has been in my patch class, and Matt has been in my patch class, at least one of the classes I did at the DAX show. But I'm going to rehash and add to some of those classes that I've had because people who really wanted to see that show didn't get to see that class. And so I'm going to revamp some of the stuff that I have in that, add to it. And that's what the one that I'm going to do for Decorators Community this year. I don't get to do a lot of the online classes like that. And I want to do more stuff specifically for my Brilliance crew, my Brilliance family out here. So you'll see more of that happening too. But I'm going to do a patch class. That's going to be the thing that I'm handling for those folks at Decorators Community. Aaron Montgomery and I will be sorting that out here soon. He pressed me on that one because his people have been asking him to. So, and I'll say honestly, the stuff that people are teaching, Matt and Jeff and hey, Justin's talking about it too, but they're all over at the Embroidery Nerd group. They talk about patches a lot, and they have really cool utilities for that too. You talk to me, I've done a mess of patches, and I've got a bunch of interesting things to say about it as well. But you'll see there's a couple of patch episodes that are already on the show. If you go back to the YouTube channel, is probably the easiest way. You go back there and find out there's 2 episodes on patches there, but there's going to be more because something that I have always loved doing, patches and emblems, big deal for me. I've done a bunch of reproduction, military stuff. I've done stuff for like really fire, police, military, businesses, mechanics, anything where a patch is applicable, I've done it. And I did a lot of them for, like I said, for TV and film. So it's something that I really love. Love emblems, love patches because they're wonderful non-sized items. But before we get done here, I'm about to finish up, but let's go ahead and go through just a few little specialties, just once again, to get you guys, like, get your mouth wet, to say, all right, I want to get my teeth ready for this. I'm going to sharpen my teeth. I want to bite into these new markets, these different markets I might not have thought of. Let's kind of sharpen our knives and say, what can we cut into that's different? And here's the stuff that we might not have thought of. If you're a classic business-to-business decorator, home decor, decorated napkins, table runners, like I said, sheets, pillowcases, curtains. These things can make a lot of money. I've done some high-end work myself. Once again, what was the thing that happened to this company? They came to other people and said, can you do a span of fabric? And no one wanted to figure it out. I said I would figure it out, started out doing multi-hooping, ended up outsourcing it once I had done all the creative work to somebody who had a full span machine with a sash bridge. They did a multi-head that had a sash frame where they ran the repeats. Yes, it takes some learning to do stuff like that. It's not massively different. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of home decor embroidery is light running, not as much coverage, and actually ends up bringing a higher margin depending. So home decor can be really interesting to do. It's something to look at. Fashion, if you've got people who have their own clothing lines, there is something there. And like I said, the customization in fashion is still there, adding to someone's existing stuff. Or there are people who need sampling done. And if you're a small house, you're a single head shop, and you can handle the kind of materials they use, there are people who are looking to get samples made who may pay more for sampling. They often have their own sources, but you never know. There is a possibility here. And also, like I said, with home decor, I've also worked not only with home decor upholstery shops, I've worked with auto upholstery, where I've done work on materials that were then used by auto upholsterers. So you would be surprised, custom car stuff is out there too. And that's another range of people who absolutely spend some money on their hobby. So think about places where people spend money on their hobby and might like to have a personalized item related to it or already use personalization. That might be a place for you to be. Like I said, patch and emblems. Everybody here is highly represented. Think about that. Patch and emblems are interesting, and they can also go in every kind of segment. I've also seen patch and emblem go pretty hard for people who are doing podcast shows, streamers, people who are doing that kind of stuff. Designers, people who are graphic designers, may be looking for tangible items to sell to their followers. And that's another thing they love: patches, emblems, stickers, and pins. If you can be the patch emblem person in that range, that might be cool. Technical embroidery. This is something you're going to have to be getting into a lot of technology and buying equipment for, but it's something to look at. It's really cool. I got to talk to people at ZSK, Nick and Andrea over at ZSK, Nick especially. They do really crazy stuff with like carbon fiber layups. They stitch circuitry. They've done heating elements for cars. I know they helped Bentley. The ZSK people helped Bentley to do their seat warming units that are done. They helped Google with some touch sensitive controls based on fabric. Technical embroidery is a really cool thing that you should just look at, just for the sheer love of saying, look at what machine embroidery can do. And also, I will say, even on home machines, even on normal commercial machines, you can use conductive thread to do things like stitch circuits. I have seen it done and done it. So it's something that you can do that's pretty interesting. Worth looking at just to see what it is for fun. And once again, I just want to get your brains lit up. I just want you to think about other stuff. Sport and team stuff. Yes, sports were hard up for a while. It looks like some sports are opening up. While sports are just starting to open up and people are very excited on doing it, believe me, they're going to want gear. Especially when they first open up and if people have been waiting for a year to get back to their sports, they're going to be proud. They're going to want to show their support. Interest groups and specialties, just in general. Like I said, my folk music people, gamers, people who are into certain subculture stuff, who have, especially if it's creative, people who do Dungeons and Dragons, cosplayers. They are people who frequently do art and other kinds of things related to their hobby, that they're creating and designing things. They may love to have some embroidered gear that goes with it. I've seen some people get quite a lot of business out of that. Medical, here's the classic ones. Medical, that is great for personalizers because a lot of the time they have to have names, specialties, even divisions under their logos. They may or may not have that. That's scrubs, stuff like that's great. Professional, of course, that's common business to business. Real estate, very frequently, they not only want to have their logos, but they'll have a DBA name or a personal name. And because their name and personality is a huge thing, part of what they do, they often like personalized gear and will pay a little bit more for it. Construction and trades, if you understand how to make things more durable, if you use the right materials, you can really come through for construction and trades people so that they get designs that hold up and work even in embroidery, so they don't end up with long snaggy stitches. Go back and check my episode about making more durable embroidery to see how that's done. Resort wear, very little right now, I know, but it's something to remember for when it lights back up. When people start traveling again, they're really going to want mementos. And honestly, I've seen people doing stay-at-home style resort wear, the resort wear style where we talk about a location that's interesting to us and add personalization and time. That commemorative style of work is being done for events that we're surviving. And that also ends up being like event work. Bridal, there is no question that bridal work is worth a lot of money. Look into the kinds of things that brides and grooms need. Handkerchiefs, customized ties. I did a lot of work with an awesome Canadian supplier of customized vintage material ties that she did a bunch of custom embroidery for people. Did great work there. Really loved it. And honestly, it spread out into ties that were just for random people. I ended up getting Rhys Davies, a comedian from I believe New Zealand. He's in a tie that I made the design for on a magazine cover somewhere because she did all these cool custom vintage ties and it spread way beyond where you might expect it to. But that's one of the cool things. Bridal is one of those places where everybody knows somebody who's gotten married or getting married. And when they know you've done the work, they may see that as a lead gen. You can use that to get them into other work related to other things they do. Film and TV, if you're anywhere near it, worthwhile to think about doing that stuff, especially if you're the kind of person who does creative work on a quick turnaround. Cool to look into that stuff. The last thing I want to deal with, I think I'm actually going to leave for another show this time. I have something that I think is going to go deeper, but let's just really quickly cover this idea. I want to talk about best customers, and I'm going to leave this for another show. Really, because I want to help you define a best customer for the kind of market you're looking for. And the real quick rundown of this, and I'm going to give you just this little taste, and then maybe in a couple of weeks we'll do a show about this. Best customers, your best customer, why do I have that in scare quotes, is the best customer for the way you work and for whom you are the best solution. And it doesn't mean that all customers are going to be the best or that you're only going to take your best customer, but there is a best customer for all of these segments. And there is like a best customer for company stores for e-commerce and for general e-commerce. And there are things that help them define. So we'll talk about this later. We'll talk about best customers later. We'll talk about this: utility, location, turnover, expansion, partnership. We're going to talk about what best customers are. And I'm actually going to leave that for later. I don't usually do this. We're already well a half hour over our usual time. And I think I'd still like to get to some comments and finish out for you folks. So what I'm going to say is, for now, let's go ahead and stop there and say best customers are a thing. But luckily, we've gotten to a lot of cool segments. We've gotten to a lot of places that I think are helpful. What I'm hopeful for is not that I have suddenly just cracked open the world and you know exactly what you're going to do. What I want you to think is, if you've only been doing one kind of decorating, if you have only thought I need to have X kind of customers to make money, if you've thought I only can make money if I make this kind of apparel or this kind of garment, this kind of object, that we've gotten to something that you hadn't thought before. If I have one idea in your head where you thought, wait, there's that group of people that I might not have thought about. Wait, there's this kind of object that I didn't think about decorating. If we've done one thing like that, then I'm happy with that. But we will cover more of it. We will go deeper on some of these things. So I think that's just how we should think about it. But let's go ahead and talk to a few of you guys in the comments before we finish up. Then we'll finish up the show. And like I said, we'll do that best customer soon. And I think we'll revisit this. We'll revisit this more than once. This is something we should do every 6 months. We should probably go back and say, hey, let's look at markets and see what's going on here. It's something that's totally useful and totally useful to everybody to think about. Let's just go ahead and jump in. A few comments here. Marianne says, each time I hoop is $9. That's great. There's a lot of people out there who are hooping for $1. And I would say, personally, for us, we wouldn't put a hoop in something until we had, between, if it was at with some count to it, $5. But yeah, $10 was pretty normal. I don't really want to stop and put a hoop in something because you have to think about all the contact you have with somebody, all the interactions, the emailing, the back and forth. And that has to be part of your calculus when you're talking about what you're going to stop and put a hoop in. You say, I started 20 years ago, only $6 per hoop. Materials have gone up and clients are fine with the cost. And here's the thing, if they're not fine with the cost, don't chase the lowest common denominator client. Chasing your way to the ground is not going to make you money long-term and not going to keep your show open. Fanny says, attending trade shows like gaming or cosplay fairs are great for reaching new audiences. Yeah, it's sad that they're not really running right now. The thing is, you can still get out online. I've seen people do this. Funny enough, I saw somebody who's building a lot of market through Twitter by commenting on people's stuff with designs he did related to something they liked, but he was being proactive. You have to be proactive and show the kind of work you want to do to the kind of people who are going to love it. Gina says, I work for upholsterers and boot makers. I've actually done that too. I've done the patterns for the front of cowboy boots before. Really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. And absolutely, Brian is 100% right about this. Every member of every club in the world is a patch customer. 100%. Whether we're talking about one of the only places we're still taking vacations to sometimes, we're talking about like national parks that have commemorative patches, where you're talking about bikes, like I said, here we have the whole scheme from, motorcycle clubs, whether you have questionable ones or legitimate ones, all the way up to the police on the other side of that spectrum, which somebody told me before, which sometimes have their own clubs. I've done police motorcycle clubs. Or writers clubs. You have that whole range of people between there, and that's just in the motorcycle business. Everybody can put a patch on something. Everybody can put a patch on a bag or a jacket. Everybody can put a patch somewhere. So those are fantastic segments. So like that. I love this segment. Just got a client. Wonderful. Probably don't need to market to movie theaters anymore. Yeah, I know. I agree. Movie theaters, no. People making movies, making content for TV is still going on right now, and still a profit center for people who are there, because a lot of people are staying at home watching streaming. Done a lot of stuff for Netflix myself. So that's there. I do ladies' monogram handkerchiefs for the deceased person to have in their hands in casket. Fast turnaround needed here. And that's a market that has value. I mean, as sad as that is, that's a market that has value, and fast turnaround has value because people need it to be fast. Pardon me, guys. Thanks so much for all the info, says Jocelyn. Thank you for being here. Mike says, great topic. Actually, next to revisit this on a regular basis, check and see if we're growing or going stale. Yeah, even if you're not going to jump out and do something new today, even if I didn't blow your socks off with something you've never heard before, this is something to keep in your mind. Where are the people buying right now? It's really easy to be invested in a segment and for the segment to go away. Like movie theaters. Let's say you did a lot of movie theater work and got taken from you when the movie theaters were shut down. Only if you were over invested in the one segment and not thinking, did you have nowhere else to go? We don't have time to lament that we have nowhere else to go. We need to find another place to go for sure. Thanks, Eric, Greg. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Pam. Lovely to have you guys here. Fran says, great to be able to list it. Silent with broken arm, itching to decorate this awful sling. Oh, Fran, I am feeling that right now. I had a bum knee for this whole week, and you've got it worse than me. I hope you get better soon. And believe me, yeah, decorating some stuff. I have done the very same thing. I've had an embroidery on a brace before, for sure. Greg says, local and regional artisan groups for valuable contacts. Yeah, make those contacts, folks. And I would say, like I said, local artisan groups, design groups. I used to get together with the graphic arts kind of council down here, and I did a lot of stuff for people after that because they were doing logos for clients. What did they do? They presented embroidered opportunities for people who they were doing logo packages and branding guides. If you haven't seen brand guides, go look at brand style guides. I have an entire episode about that. I helped people develop their brand style guides. Why I had answers about what was possible in embroidery. Being a solutions person made me more valuable as a consultant than just somebody who was putting stitches on a shirt. Once again, thanks, Eric. Good information. And Matt says, Facebook hiking group I'm in was looking for patches. Good thing I know a guy. Absolutely. Get out there and do the things you like to do. But as you're doing them, remind people who you are, show your work, let people know what you do. Don't be afraid to do that. Plus, people say, I don't want to be too salesy. I'm not saying jump out there and go 50 for this much money. This is how many I do for 100. Get this today. No, show your work. Say that you do the work. Let people know it's there. Be proud of what you do. You're providing value. It's like I say in my niche marketing article that I've said before. You're not being the classic used car salesman. I think they get a bad rap anyway. You are providing a thing that you believe in, that you think has value to a person you think will want it. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with trading something that you've worked hard on for money so that you can keep doing what you want to do and live a nice life. That's what we're all here to do. So get out there, show the kind of work you want to do. Look at different market segments, look at different kinds of embroidery, look at different styles of embroidery, different places to put it, different people who might need it, and think, how can I solve a problem for them? How can I make people feel better? How can I help them engage with the things they love? And how can I use embroidery to do it? So with that, guys, I'm so happy you were here this Friday, and I cannot wait to see you again next week. Join in on the comments. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. By the way, 1,000 on YouTube alone now, finally. I know it's not a big number, but it's a big number for us. Love to have you guys here, and thank you for joining me, and I cannot wait to see you again.